with the heat degree. All right, so let's start. So Renat will not join us today. He's sick, so just gave me like a thumbs up about an hour ago. So let's start the webinar. So yeah, let's do it. So welcome everybody to another episode hosted by Proboxx. We are pleased to have everybody on board. Today we're going to have a special episode, import and selling in Canada. So today we brought a great speakers beside myself that I will try to put some input all together regarding logistics. So we have Fiona. I will make an intro, all right? So Fiona, besides being a good friend of mine, in 2020, Fiona launched her e-commerce business after a car accident forced her to reestablish herself. By combining her accumulated business skills with powerful purpose, she developed a brand that resonates with her audience, which results in being able to create a multiple seven-figure business within 18 months. Wow, that's amazing. Together with us as well is Adam Lewis. Adam is the co-founder and president of Clearit Custom Broker, the world's first digital custom broker, saving import and export to the North America market worldwide. So welcome, Adam, and welcome, Fiona. How are you guys?
Thank you. Doing great. Thank you.
I'm good. I'll just I've got a bit of a croaky sore throat myself, so if I'm muting myself occasionally, it's just to mute out any coughing.
Yeah, I told you, you have like a sexiest voice now, so that's so
for those that I've been clearing my throat all morning.
Yeah. So take a lemon, it will be okay. So for those that listen to us, so basically, if you have any questions, so drop down your question under the chat box, and myself, Fiona, or Adam will try to respond. And let's start. So again, we should have like Renat also from a 3PL, but he couldn't make it. So we'll try to cover his knowledge. So let's start with you, Fiona. Why selling in Canada?
Look, I launched my brand in the US, and Amazon, to begin with, allowed me to do the cross-border selling into Canada from the US, and I started to develop quite a solid business doing it that way. And that was all well and good until right in the middle of Q4 of 2020, they withdrew the products from that program and told me they were not eligible. So that was quite a shock for me, because the business was doing quite well, and then all of a sudden it was just ripped from out under me. So I made the decision that Canada definitely was a marketplace worth continuing, but I needed to get the product in the country and not rely on the cross-border program that Amazon has. So yeah, that's how it all started for me.
And did you start by like launching products from China directly, or did you ship like cargo from the US to Canada directly?
Look, initially I found it quite a difficult marketplace to break into, because it was during COVID and there were a lot of restrictions on the restock levels. You know, at one point I had restock level of 40, you know, some of my master cartons have 44 units in them. So, you know, then I was having to pay to split cartons, and it was really, really tricky. That went on for about 18 months. So although I was shipping directly into Canada and using 3PLs there, it just financially, it wasn't viable for me to do that, because I was having to pay for the 3PL in Canada, having to pay their minimum fees each month. And then the shipping, you know, because it was only LCL, it was quite a small amount going into Canada. So it just wasn't making sense for me, given the amount of stock I could get into the Amazon warehouses. So then I was looking for another way around, and then another seller suggested that I might want to go cross-border from the US and just have the one 3PL, one set of shipments, and just go across the border. And that's what I did.
Right. Cool. So Adam, maybe you could, like, I have a lot of experience in terms of like freight forwarding. We're doing a lot of cross-border like shipments with you guys. We've cleared it together. And I have a lot of experience of logistics going freight forwarding from China, but maybe you can elaborate more about like some of the practice of importing to Canada. What's the difference between importing to Canada to importing to the US? Because there is a lot of difference from the customs purpose or the customs side.
There's a big difference. I mean, look, being a Canadian and US customs broker, the difference between the two, I mean, Canadian customs is a walk in the park compared to the US. Not to say that there aren't, strict rules and regulations that you have to follow in Canada, which there obviously are, but it's much simpler. There are far fewer additional forms, permits, licenses that are needed to import into Canada. Obviously, there are specific products where you do need to have permits and licenses ahead of time, but for general cargo, it's pretty straightforward. Look, when importing to Canada, the most important thing you can do is do your homework ahead of time. When it comes down to customs regulations, and that includes like tariff classifications, valuation rules, document requirements, understanding the duties and taxes that are going to have to be paid. I mean, that's the best thing you can do for yourself, and really, it shouldn't have to be so daunting. I know, Clearit, we typically service the SMB market, so small, medium businesses, and a lot of companies come to us, it's their first time importing. And they come to us with this attitude that they're very nervous about it, and they're expecting something like completely overwhelming, when the reality is, it doesn't have to be. You approach a customs broker ahead of time, whether it's Clearit or anyone else. You do a little bit of homework. There's no reason why it can't be a painless, smooth process.
So I have to add on that, like, again, Adam, I truly don't know how much, like, from Clearit point of view, you're like handling like e-commerce or Amazon sales compared to retailers and, like, I don't know, regular importers, right, to the Canadian market. But I can say that from Proboxx point of view, like, the high majority of our clients are like Amazon sellers. What you describe now, it's something that Amazon sellers in general should do, and they doesn't do it normally. So you don't believe the time that, like, those sellers starting like production line with new products, they doesn't check the regulation, that doesn't check the HTS code, they don't know what's going to be the duty on a specific market, and later on they got bad surprises, right? And then just because of the duty, the margin decreased a lot, then they have like a lot of regulations issues. So I think like, coming from my point of view and your point of view all together, make your homework, right? So, like, check in advance with a custom broker, with Clearit, or with whoever. Check about the product, check about the regulations of the product, check the compliance of the duty on the product to verify it in advance. I think that's the biggest thing we can, like, provide here some goal or insight in that sense. And it's huge in my opinion.
Yeah, for a lot of customers that we see, customs was kind of an afterthought. They put in all this work on, making sure that they can, produce a product overseas or wherever they're, getting their product, making sure they're having, paying the lowest price, and putting all their focus there. And then, are only really finding out what a customs broker is once their cargo is actually arriving at the border. So a lot of customers that we see are only finding out that they need a customs broker as their shipment is arriving. They've never dealt with a customs broker before.
Right.
So, I mean, look, it's if you are going to be if you're going to be taking part in cross-border trade, it's extremely important that you do your homework ahead of time, like Amit is saying. It's the only thing you can do to protect yourself. Like you said, many times we see customers who, didn't expect that there would be 18% duty on their product, and that's killing their margin. And all of a sudden, they're excited to have their first shipment come in, and they're going to sell it on whether it's Amazon or anywhere else, and they have small margins, but they're starting out a business, only to find out that that's not exactly the case. So it's just as important as anything else to really understand what your landed cost truly is going to be before you
right
go ahead with that. buying that product.
Yeah.
Fiona, do you have like any like experience to share in that regard?
Look, for me, this just highlights this, you've really got to know, like you're saying, the homework. So it's not just knowing about what your import duties are, what your HTS code, is your product compliant with the local laws? So, I had done all my testing for US, and it wasn't until I was already selling there that I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't done the compliance test for Canada. So it's not just North America. You've got to be compliant in every way, shape, and form. Have you registered for GST? And in Canada, it's a bit more complex because you've got several different provinces that you need to be registered for GST, or VAT, I think it's called. Sorry, in Australia, it's GST. So there's a lot of homework you need to do before you enter in any country. And Canada, of course, does have its specific things that you've got to be aware of. So, it's easy to sort of be quite naive, but you can't afford to be, because like you say, Adam, people don't realize and they haven't taken into consideration the customs duties, or perhaps on importing, they find out that they don't have the right compliance. So I'm in the children's category. So I've got to have the right compliance certifications, because otherwise customs might pull the shipment in and say, hey, well, is this product safe for children? Have you got the certifications to show that? So there's a lot of different layers to, preparing to enter any marketplace.
Right. Fiona, maybe like, I believe some of our audience here would like to know, like in terms of like selling velocity, what's like, if you can compare it to the US market, what's the difference in selling velocity between the US to the Canadian market in general?
Probably about 10 to 20%, depending on time of year. Of what I do in the US. It's similar to Australia, a very similar market, but definitely worth being there. Absolutely. But it's growing. As I mentioned, it took me a long time to gain any traction because I had such a low restock limit. So I was in stock, out of stock. And I don't know if that's changed now that we're through the worst of the COVID troubles. So maybe people going into Canada may not have that same issue that I had, but I just could not stay in stock with a restock limit of 40 units. And eventually it went up to 100. But now I've got a healthy restock limit, and it's easy for me to stay in stock. So that marketplace is growing. But still, I mean, if you're doing 100 grand in the US, then you could be doing 10 to 20 in Canada, but perhaps depending on which niche you're in. That's my experience anyway. And Australia is very similar. I find UK is bigger than both of those markets.
I have to admit that coming from my experience working with sellers, like there is really limited number of sellers that I know that selling in the Australian market compared to the Canadian market, which like, again, maybe because of like the program Amazon had with like shipping from the US to Canada, there is much more sellers going to Canada compared to like going to Australia. So it's for us, it's quite an intensive market, like going through. I think in terms of like being into stock or out of stock, I would just say something that those like sellers that manufacture in China, they have to acknowledge one big thing in terms of the transit time to Canada, because Canada basically the main port, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, the main port is in Vancouver, and most of the FBA centers around Toronto. So if you manufacture in China, it will call Vancouver port, and from there it will go by train to Toronto Reg Station.
Correct,
and from my experience, the train service in Canada is quite horrible because there is always strike in the union there. So eventually the transit time is much longer normally compared to what's going on to the US, especially to the West Coast. So some sellers said, okay, I have inventory in China. It will take, I don't know, 30-35 days, like it's going to the West Coast in the States. But it truly doesn't match the transit time. So transit time, from my experience to Canada, is about 50 to 60 days. So if you want to be in stock and if you want to calculate your inventory better, so you must watch it out and know the transit time and know the FBA and understand the difference between like transit time to the US and to Canada. And there is a big difference in that regard. Adam, anything else on that?
Well, look, I mean, it's just another reason to kind of stay on top of trade news in both Canada and the US. Yeah, both Prince Rupert and Vancouver, which is where the majority of cargo from the Far East come in from. They've seen a lot of strikes in the last couple of years. Same thing with our rail lines, a lot of strikes. But we can't necessarily put that on overseas manufacturers. It's not necessarily their responsibility to keep up to date with with that. It's something as an importer that you need to take into account. So just stay on top of it. And look, even when a strike ends, you can't assume that port congestion is all of a sudden just going to open up. They're usually dealing with a backlog. I mean, even a week or 2 week long strike can cause a ripple effect where things are going to be slow for 2 or 3 months. So something to consider.
Yeah. Cool. Fiona, in terms of or also for Adam, I'm sure you're aware of that as well. In terms of the customer buying habits between the US and Canada, there is a difference, if there is one, or basically the same?
I certainly haven't noticed anything different. It's pretty much the same. My top product in Canada is the same as my top product in the US. Slowest selling one is the same in both marketplaces. Not a lot of difference.
Right. And
yeah, Canada very much mirrors the US. In terms of our likes and dislikes and what we're buying. It's really just the US has about 10 times the amount of people, which is why you can expect about 10 times the amount of business. It has a little bit stronger of an economy, or actually much stronger economy, but yeah, I mean, pretty much the same buying habits. We see the same products going back and forth, so there's not much of a difference.
I know the Canadian. Yeah, please.
So I was going to say, I find my return rate percentage is lower in Canada.
Really?
So
we're very polite.
Yeah,
we don't
slightly
like
different.
We'll just politely, we'll just politely keep it and deal with it. So
or maybe they, I think in America people buy more than what they want because they're not sure. They get it and then they decide what they want. I don't think that's the only country that I get that. I don't have the same behaviors in the other marketplaces. So Canadians are less likely to return the product.
Yeah. So we have a question here. What do you do with returns in Canada? So that's a question from our audience here.
So for me, they're just going back into Amazon, and they're either destroyed or they're returned into stock.
Right. Cool. So we should have somebody like Renette from a 3PL. So maybe Adam, maybe you can add, or maybe Fiona can add. In terms of how do you find a 3PL process and cost in Canada compared to the US in general? So by the way, I know some sellers working with us have a problem in Canada with finding a reliable 3PL that know Amazon, knowing the process, knowing how to build SOPs. So from your experience, guys, what input can you add here?
Look,
Fiona, you can take this. Just for me, our process kind of ends before it hits the 3PL in Canada. So I can let Fiona speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think for me, my biggest frustration was not having enough volume to warrant having the 3PL, because they were quite expensive from the perspective of minimum monthly fees.
Yeah.
And when you're only selling, less than 1,000 units or 2,000 units a month, which is where I was to begin with, it didn't warrant it. It was just wow, I'm paying so much money, and then the stock wasn't moving fast enough. So I shipped a whole pile of stock in, and then because of the restock limits and problems, so it was costing me a lot of money. And I have struggled to find a reliable 3PL, to be honest. So yeah, that's why for me, going cross border from my Californian warehouse, I'm using Clearit. I find Clearit a sensational solution. Very, like you were saying, just makes it so easy. I don't even have to think. I just put in the shipment and upload any documents, and the next minute, boom, it's into Canada, and it's where it needs to be. There's never ever been a problem. So Adam, I've never met you before, but there's a bit of feedback.
Great, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm a very happy customer of Clearit. I do find the process super simple. They've got like an interview platform that you log into to do everything, and you've got a live chat. So there's, you want got any questions, or if you want to add extra information in, then you've got someone there to help you. So yeah, I find the Clear It process a really great way to bring stock into Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have another question here. I think this is more to Adam. So what should we expect in regards to tax services in Canada over annual sales of 30,000 Canadian dollar in terms of frequency and cost?
You want to repeat that? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah.
What
Again, what should we accept in regards to tax services in Canada over annual sales of 30,000 Canadian dollar in terms of frequency and cost?
Is that in relation to VAT services?
Yeah,
I think
that's
yeah.
more something.
I think Shuki, if you want to raise the question here, so please. Tax commitment.
Yeah, okay.
Tax
So
commitment.
I used, on Amazon, they've got like a providers platform where you can select providers. I found accountants in Canada through Amazon, and they were $70 a month. I think they're now $90 a month, and they do all my returns. They helped me to get registered. It was a very easy process. And then they plug into my Amazon account, so they pull all of the reports each month, and then they do my returns for me. So it's fairly easy. And I think it's better to have someone local doing your taxes, because they know the rules and they know what you can and can't do. So that's how I got around the tax commitments.
Yeah.
Is it filing monthly? It's quarterly.
So Adam, I just want to ask you one thing, and let me describe. Yep. So one of the things that is happening that, like, I'm sure Fiona can relate to that. A lot of Amazon sellers doesn't want to create an entity, let's say in Canada, for that example, before they knowing what's going to be the selling velocity. If it's really like they need to know the revenue and the selling velocity before they take the decision to create an entity. So one of the things that Clear do is providing like some kind of FIOR, right? Which is like an entity for non-residential Canadian citizen. Maybe you can add like more in depth in terms of taxation. What does it exactly mean? Because that's a question I'm getting a lot of the time, which I really don't know what's the answer on that. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about it, Adam.
Yeah, as an importer into Canada, no matter where you're based, you have the option of registering as a non-resident importer. And what that means is that you essentially have the same rights as any kind of Canadian importer, but you're registered outside of Canada. If you are doing more than $30,000 a year in business in Canada, you are expected to register for the GST program, which allows you to collect and remit GST, which is a federal flow-through tax. So you're expected to do so. Now, if you do $32,000 in a year and you haven't registered for the GST program, it's not necessarily that you're going to have someone banging down at your door from the federal government, but the expectations are there. The best thing to do is work with a local accountant who understands Canadian tax law. It's not necessary that you have to create a Canadian entity, but your non-resident entity can be registered for GST. So, it's not necessary that you have to create a Canadian business that's registered in Canada in order to do business here. The Canadian government actually makes it relatively easy for outside businesses to do business in Canada.
And I know the answer, but I will give you the, like, how long does it take to create an entity or to create an entity for non-residential, like, Canadian citizens? So let's say I'm a seller now. Yeah, I don't know. I heard this webinar. I decided to try to, like, issuing a non-residential. How long does it take, or how long should I consider in that sense?
So it takes, through Clear It, you can usually get back a non-resident importer number the same day. So if you register with us like in the morning, by the afternoon, you can have a non-resident importer number, which means you can start importing into Canada. As a non-resident importer who's not registered with GST, you are subject to pay that GST upon import, which is a 5%, flat tax, but you have no way to recoup that. So you're basically that 5% tax is gone. If you then register for the GST program, you as a non-resident importer through your Canadian accountant can apply to get that GST back either on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. The registering for GST takes a little bit longer. It went up during COVID and went up to about 90 days. Usually it's about 30 to 60 days to get approved for a GST program. But you always have the option of once you've been approved, you can go back 6 months and collect all the GST that you paid before.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
So that's good. So, all right. So those who listen to us, so if you decided to try the Canadian market, so basically it's take 24 to 48 hours max, and you can start like import goods into Canada, right?
Yeah, you can, same day. You can register on Clear It as a non-resident importer and have a shipment clear the same day.
Right. So another question is, can we file our tax return once a year?
Yeah, I mean, that's more a question for an accountant, but yes, you have the option of filing. Mostly it's either done quarterly or annually. There are options to do it monthly too. But yes, you have the option of doing it annually.
Cool. So Adam, a question to you. Any special duty, taxes, or watch out you need to know about before importing to Canada?
Look, every product has different requirements, has different duty rates. So there's not necessarily anything specifically to watch out for. I would say the biggest thing that we're advising our customers to watch out for now is the new CARM initiative. So this is the first major update for importing into Canada in decades. It's part of the modernization of customs in Canada. And what it's doing is it's mirroring many of the requirements that you have in the US in terms of bonds. So right now, as an importer, you don't necessarily have to have a bond to import into Canada. That's going to change. It's scheduled to take effect in October. They've pushed that date off a couple times now. I think it was originally supposed to be implemented like 2 years ago. So it keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed because there's so many delays. But as of October, all importers into Canada are expected to have a bond that you'll need to purchase through a surety company or through a customs broker. Clear It will be offering customs bonds.
Single entry or annual bond, by the way, or both will be available?
So at the moment, there is no concept of a single entry bond in Canada, but that can change. Everyone should be on an annual bond.
Right. Interesting.
So that's the most important thing any importer needs to keep in mind right now, that as of October, you do need to have a bond in place. Now, most surety companies.
Can you already file to a bond or not yet? Because the programs.
Yeah, bonds have always been available in Canada. They're just not necessarily a requirement.
Right.
But yeah, you can purchase a bond now, but it will be mandatory as of October 2023.
Good. So I just would add in terms of like duty, compared to the US market, of course, beside the fact that there is GST of 5% in Canada, which you can claim back in case you are registered to the program. Don't forget, those sellers are listening to us, that you can have a duty, same product, same HTS code in the US with 2% duty, and in Canada it can be with 0% or with 10%. So even if you know your HTS code and the duty percentage in the US, it doesn't relate exactly to the same percentage in Canada. So you have to verify in both countries.
Yes, and Canada is slightly a bit more protectionist which means that more products have duty in Canada than the United States. So,
Right. So Fiona, a question here to you. It's coming again from our audience. How would you price products in Canada in comparison to the US market? You are on mute.
I was coughing before, so I had to put it on mute. I just basically convert from US dollars into Canadian dollars, round it up or down accordingly, because it sort of works out about the same for me.
Don't you think, but because of there is less like competition there, maybe you can rise up a little bit your pricing over there?
Look, where I can, so sometimes I have to put coupons, but I mean, as far as the basic price, but in the US, because things are becoming more competitive and people copy my products, I often have to put coupons or prime exclusive deals on the US account, but I don't have to do that in Canada.
And do you add tax to your pricing?
That's all built into it, yeah.
Right. Cool. So what we can talk further about? I don't know. So I will add from my point of view. I think like in terms of like selling in Canada, if you are a seller now and you don't want to take off your inventory from China or from a supplier or wherever, and you have some inventory sits in the US, it can be a great opportunity working maybe with Proboxx together with Clearit and moving goods from the US to Canada market. It's take about like a week, door to door normally. And it's a great opportunity at least to search the market and to understand what's going on there in terms of sales. So I think for those sellers, and I know like one of our audience here, I talked with her like specific in that. So I'm sure she's now, I'm talking about her. So I think that can be a great opportunity. Take some of your inventory, take 10 boxes, 20 boxes, 30 boxes, whatever, ship it to Canada, try to sell there. If you see the potential, so go to your supplier and start like production and ship to Canada. Do you recommend DDP shipping to Canada? So we don't recommend doing DDP, not to the US and not to Canada. We try to follow the rules here. So doing DDP, I would not recommend. Like I know Chinese forwarders are doing DDP. Like Adam, I'm not sure if you're even aware of that situation. But Proboxx, Clearit, Fiona, we all know each other. We like to work based on the regulation.
you want to retain as much control as possible.
Yeah, it's too risky. Yeah.
And also just like following the rules, I think it's important, right?
Yeah, there's too much risk involved.
Everyone can have his own decision, right? And everyone can work with whomever he wants. That's coming from our side. So we have another question. So just to clear, so we have some few. So just to clear, this is a question. So just to clear, since in Amazon Canada the price is including the price included in the price, we should convert the US price to Canadian dollar and add the tax on the price, correct? So this is for you, Fiona.
So I believe Amazon is collecting the VAT, the GST, and so then I can, when we put the returns in, we work out how much. I don't know how it works. I'm not the accountant, to be honest. That's something that you would need to talk to the accountants on, because I don't really know how all of that works. But look, for me, one thing I will say, if anyone's wanting to test Canada out, I think the cross-border from being you're already in the US, the cross-border over to Canada is a really good way to get a good feel for how your brand will go in the country. And when you get enough volume to warrant putting stock directly into a 3PL, that's when you would ship directly from China into Canada. like Amit
Right.
was saying. But I think that's a great way to test the market, you know, and it's a lot easier to test the market in Canada than it is to Australia. You've got to commit when you go to Australia because
Right, exactly.
you got to send stock there and have a 3PL. But Canada, you can like drip feed straight into Amazon from the US. So
Right.
that
Just
would be
don't forget the goods need to be on pallets, right? So you don't believe how many requests we got. So we have like 12 cartons. So going from such distance, going for US normally from, let's say, New York, especially from Los Angeles to Toronto is, I don't know, about 4,000 kilometers, right? So if you want the inventory come eventually in a good condition, you have to put it in pallets. So don't forget it. When you request a quote from a freight forwarder, so ask the 3PL where's the inventory at the moment, ask to put them in pallets and then send the pallets dimension and weight. Another question we have here, Adam, I think it's to you. NRA number is requested from us at customs when sending products from Turkey to Canada. How can we get an NRA number?
Very simple. Especially when you're dealing with Clear It, at registration, you would actually register as a non-resident importer. So it gives you the option and asks you, you know, is this a personal import or is it for business? Are you based in Canada? Are you based outside of Canada? So by choosing a business based outside of Canada, you'll configure account for non-resident importer, and Clear It requests that number automatically from customs. So it's pretty straightforward. You know, dealing with other customs brokers, I'm not sure exactly what their process is, but it's just part of our registration process. So very straightforward.
Cool. So for our listeners, if you have any further question, please drop down here in the chat box before we wrap up everything. Fiona, anything else you would like to add, like in terms of like selling in Canada in general?
Only that it's definitely worth going in and seeing how your products go. You know, it's every little bit counts, and that's the way I look at it, is wash, rinse, repeat. So when you're growing your business, once you know which products are doing well, then you can go wide and expand. And Canada is a great market to do that in. So, you know, launching in the US is good because you've got really high volumes there, and you can very quickly see which products are going to go to the top, which ones are going to be average, which ones will fail. But once you know which ones are your winners, then take them into other markets. And as I mentioned, Canada is so easy to go into, especially when you can drip feed from the US into Canada using services such as what you guys have. So that would be, I guess, my parting words is it's worth doing. You know, if you're doing 20 grand a month in Canada, and then you're doing 20 grand a month in Australia, and then you're doing 40 grand a month in UK, that's a lot of extra capital, you know, money going through your business. It's not going to measure up to what you have in the US, but put them all together and it's becoming a very substantial business.
Right. Agree 100%. Adam?
Well, you know what, just one thing that wasn't mentioned that is also very often overlooked is that Canada actually has some pretty strict labeling laws. And it's very important, especially for these non-resident importers who are shipping products from overseas into Canada. It's very important to make sure that you are complying with the Canadian labeling laws, especially when it comes to language. So when shipping to Canada, most of your labels need to be in both Canada and need to be in both English and in French. So that's also something to.
I made that mistake. I didn't know.
Yeah, and that's something
until Amazon said, "Show us your labeling." And I'm like, "Oops."
Yeah, and that is overlooked all the time, especially with non-resident importers. So that's just something very briefly that I want to mention. It's not meant to scare anyone, but you know, just these little nuances that can be, you know, overlooked. But look, all in all, importing into Canada does not have to be daunting, does not have to be complicated. You know, reach out to a customs broker or, you know, anyone ahead of time. Do your homework ahead of time, and, you know, it'll be a walk in the park.
I can see someone asking about packaging, and if it doesn't already have French, one way to get around that is just get some stickers made, put them on the bottom of the box. You can get around it. If the stock's already in the US and you can't print more, then just do some little stickers.
Right. Fiona, Adam, I would like to thank you personally for doing this live webinar. From myself and Proboxx company to all the audience here. So thank you very much. It was super, super valuable. I'm sure everybody can take a lot of that. So again, thank you. And I wish everybody a good day and successful time of the business. We have like a Prime Day, like 6 days from now, or 7 days from now, 6 days from now. So good luck to everybody and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Sumit. Bye,
Thanks.
Adam. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.